Week 16 is underway, fellas, and today we are breaking down the top 36 running back tier list, going through all of the major injuries. There's a lot of them. Usage, player trends, who to start, who to sit, all that good stuff will be covered in today's video. This is the most important week of the season for you guys. I'm sure if you had a bye last week, you've awoken from your slumber and you're ready to go and ready to get another W and move on to the championship. So we're not going to waste any time. Let's start with the laundry list of injuries that we got to cover in today's video. First up, we have Isaac Guerrero. Since I'm doing this a day earlier than usual, we do got to do a little bit of projection here. Any injury updates that have changed from Friday practice reports, Saturday practice reports, and so on, I will post down below in the pinned comment. So if you're watching this Saturday morning or Sunday morning or something, there should be some injury updates if any of this information is outdated. So Isaac Guerrero, probably ruled out already, hasn't been officially ruled out yet, but he is unlikely to play according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. He tweaked a hamstring in practice, so it looks like it's going to be the Patrick Taylor show in the 49ers backfield. Alvin Kamara of the Saints, groin injury, likely out for this game, maybe the season as well, according to Adam Schefter, in addition to the Guerrero injury there. So we got Kendre Miller as a fill-in running back, Patrick Taylor as a fill-in running back this week. The major question marks right now that could change from the time that I'm recording this to the time that you guys might be listening to this. Tony Pollard re-injured that ankle injury last week, which caused Tajay Spears, of course, to have the great game. He ended up leaving early, did not return. And he has not practiced either Wednesday or Thursday with that ankle injury. By the time you guys are watching this, he may have already been ruled out. I expect him to not play as of my kind of projections here. Any updates will be down below, like I said. So it looks like it should be the Tajay Spears show at the running back position for Tennessee. The other big one is Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, both of the Seattle Seahawks. Charbonnet dealing with an oblique injury, which caused him to practice or not practice on Wednesday and was limited on Thursday. And then Kenneth Walker, who's missed the last 2 games with a calf issue, did not participate on Wednesday, but a full participant on Thursday. Dr. Jesse Morris of Injury Experts is projecting Charbonnet to miss the game because these oblique injuries, according to him, the history of this injury, usually players miss a game or 2 with them if they're the running back position, but he expects Walker to be active given the full participation and the fact that he's coming up on the end of his timeline for that calf issue. So as of right now, I have these running backs ranked as if Zach Charbonnet will be out, Kenneth Walker will be in, but any injury updates I will change, like I said. And then we do have a couple more injuries to rattle off here. Trey Benson has not practiced 2 days in a row. Amari DiMercato already on IR. So if both of those guys are out, Trey Benson, the one that's in question right now, James Conner is going to go absolutely nuclear, probably have 80-90% of the snaps for the Cardinals against the league worst Carolina Panthers run defense. And then David Montgomery, Nick Chubb, and Sincere McCormick are all out for the rest of the season. So upgrades to Jahmyr Gibbs, Jerome Ford, Alexander Mattison, and Amir Abdullah. So let's get into the locked-in running back starts. Running backs 1 through 12 in my rankings. You guys should probably know that you have to start these guys, but I'm going to go over who has a good matchup, bad matchup, and who's in a high-scoring game environment. So, as mentioned, James Conner versus the 32nd ranked Carolina Panthers run defense, potentially without Trey Benson and Amari DiMercato. Jahmyr Gibbs now without David Montgomery against the 29th ranked Chicago Bears defense. Bijan against the Giants, Jacobs against the Saints on Monday night, James Cook 14-point home favorites against the New England Patriots, Devon Achane against the 49ers in the Shanahan Bowl, and then you have Chuba Hubbard versus the Cardinals, Derrick Henry versus the Steelers as the above average to really good matchups there. Some matchups who are projecting to be high-scoring game environments. You have Gibbs versus the Bears. I think that one might be the shootout of the week. Chase Brown versus the Cleveland Browns. James Conner and Chuba Hubbard playing against each other there. James Cook against the Patriots, Kyron Williams against the Jets, also expecting that one to be pretty high scoring. Derrick Henry versus the Steelers, not really sure that one's going to go super high because it's the Ravens and Steelers. And then Saquon Barkley versus the Commanders as well. As far as the elite running backs in my top 12 who are in bad matchups, who might underperform, you have Joe Mixon versus the Chiefs. It appears his health status is going to be fine, but keep in mind he does have a really difficult matchup this week on Saturday afternoon. Chase Brown versus the Browns, again, tougher matchup against the run, but it's a great offense, obviously, so he's probably going to still move the ball there. Kyron Williams versus the Jets. Again, Jets are a little bit more of a pass funnel defense. Saquon Barkley versus the Washington Commanders as well, although he did have a solid game against them last time they played. So I do like to highlight a guy or two from this tier, just if there's any usage changes. Keep an eye on James Cook, because since week 10, he has not played a single game over 50% of the snaps. They're using a lot more Ty Johnson, using a lot more Ray Davis. The fantasy production is still there because the Bills are just putting up monster offensive production. They'll probably do the same thing yet again against the Patriots this week, but just keep in mind that James Cook is more of an efficiency play rather than a volume play at this moment in time. And Chase Brown, again, it is worth noting just how good this dude has been. 23.3 PPR points per game since week 9, and his workload somehow is getting better by the week. 92% of the snaps, 96% of the carries last week. He is an absolute workhorse as well, which is why he is in my top 12. Shouldn't be shocking to anybody. Now let's get into the high-end RB2s. So I'm going to go over 6 running backs at a time, as I always do, starting with one that I might need to explain myself on a little bit. Breece Hall versus the Los Angeles Rams. I have him ranked as my RB13 this week. The 12th best defense against the run in the NFL. The Jets are in what I consider to be a really good game environment, like I already kind of alluded to with Kyren Williams. 46.5 over-under. That is top 3 on the slate. And the over is catching a good amount of the steam as well. The Jets are at home versus a Rams team that will probably put up points on the other side of the ball. The reason that people are hesitant to start Breece Hall is because widely he's been on everybody's injury radar, because in week 13, he was limited after the bye after suffering an injury in week 11. They go on bye in week 12. He comes back. He has 6 points in that game. And then last week, he was limited again, 49% of the snaps after missing week 14. So everybody's a little bit worried about Breece Hall right now because of the injury. This week, he's totally off the injury report. That is a crucial piece of information. He's not full practicing. He's not even listed on the injury report with that knee injury. So if we get week 6 to week 11 Breece Hall, which is what we were getting before that injury, he was an 18.5 PPR point per game scorer and a guy that I was routinely ranking as an RB1 on any given week. Plus, Aaron Rodgers and the rest of the offense is playing a lot better right now. 2 straight games with 300-plus passing yards. You had Adams go nuts last week. So I know he's hard to trust. I get why people would not want to play Breece Hall this week. But I personally, in our listener league, am not sitting my first-round pick, who's immensely talented and projects a lot better this week than he did in weeks past. Remember, last week I had Breece Hall ranked in the 20s because I was anti-Breece coming off of that injury with limited practice. But he's not even listed on the injury report this week, so I feel pretty good that not only is he going to have a good game, but I actually like him to go higher than 83.5 rushing plus receiving yards on Underdog, and we're going to be building out an entry there. So I talked about this on our Thursday live stream, but the decision point I actually have in our listener league is Bucky Irving versus Breece Hall. Bucky is currently dealing with something. Breece is not, at least according to the practice reports. The exact decision I have to make is these 2 guys. And then, of course, if T. Higgins doesn't play, that'll make my decision easier. I'll just play both of them. But Irving in a fantastic game environment as well. He has been limited participation in practice back-to-back days with the back and the hip issues. Remember, he barely played last week after very limited practice throughout the week. And honestly, that's the tiebreaker for me in this decision. Bucky still managed to have 13.3 PPR points last week versus a very tough Chargers defense, but his workload suffered and his carries were down. Rachaad White was very, very capable in that game, so they gave Rachaad White more carries. And I think the same thing will happen this week if Bucky Irving is still kind of banged up. So if you got Bucky Irving, you should play him. But if you do have a guy like Breece Hall or somebody better, I don't think he's necessarily a must play. It's a 48.5 point over-under game. Bucks got to win it. They want to stay on top of the division, so it's a very important game for them. But there is some risk of re-aggravation. There's some risk of limited work because Rachaad White and Sean Tucker are capable guys themselves. So that is why I have Bucky ranked a little bit lower than maybe some people do. Running back 15 for me, Aaron Jones versus the Seattle Seahawks this week. Jones and the Seahawks defense this week that has been quietly very bad against the run. They've allowed the 7th most rushing yards per game to running backs this year and the 11th most targets per game to running backs as well. The Vikings are trying to catch Detroit right now. The NFC playoff picture is not really set in stone at all. Like Detroit, Philadelphia, and Minnesota, and even Green Bay are all pushing to try and get a bye right now. They are going to be heavily motivated to win this game. And even though this is a raucous Seattle crowd that they're going to be traveling to, the Vikings got to have this one if they want a chance at the division title and the first round bye. Aaron Jones has also gone beyond this 66.5 rushing yardage total in 4 of his last 6 games and 3 of his last 4 games. So I feel pretty good about Aaron Jones to have a good one against the Seattle Seahawks, and he definitely needs to be in your lineup as well. RB16 for me on the slate is Tajay Spears, who I already alluded to. I'm ranking as if Tony Pollard will be out because that is what many fantasy docs are projecting. Plus, that's what the practice reports of DNP Wednesday and Thursday lead me to believe. If Pollard plays, he's likely downgraded himself to a low-end RB2. Tajay Spears probably a deep league flex play at best. with the ankle and a high risk for re-injury. So Tajay Spears, in his absence, when Pollard left the game for like 3/4 of that game, he had a whopping 7 targets and scored 27.2 PPR points. And that was with Tony Pollard actually scoring a touchdown at the beginning of the game. He could have had an even better game. Indianapolis is allowing the 2nd most carries to running backs. They're allowing the 5th most yards to running backs on the ground. And they're allowing the 10th most targets. I think if Tajay Spears is alone in this backfield, man, he could have a monster game in this one. So I feel really, really good about him, especially with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. You're looking at a guy who's probably going to check down quite a bit. So if you have Tajay Spears, I mean, 16 might be too low. Like, I might even have to move him up ahead of this if I really think about it. Like, he has a really, really good matchup here. So running back 17 for me, Rico Dowdle versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Of course, same game environment as Bucky Irving, 48.5-point over-under. To me, this is a little bit of a Gutalytics take as a Bucs fan. I'm obviously repping the gear right now, but for some reason, I feel like we're going to lose this game because we just won a game, highly emotional, beat the Chargers. What a great game. But we're on the road against Dallas this week versus a defense that ranks 10th in DVOA since Micah Parsons' return, and we just kind of punched above our weight class and beat the shit out of the Chargers. So I'm worried we might drop this game, and it seems like a potential trap, like 4-point road favorites for a Dallas team that's actually won 3 of their last 4 games. Anyways, Dowdle in this game profiles really well. 18 or more carries in 4 straight weeks. That is unbelievable production for a running back of Rico Dowdle's caliber, at least coming into the season. Rushing totals of 86 yards, 112, 131, and 149 the last 3 games, or the last 4 games there. So Rico Dowdle has a top 10 defense that he's going up against the run with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I feel very good that he's going to get a lot of carries, going to get a lot of volume, and if Tampa Bay does cook the Cowboys early, this higher than 16.5 rushing attempts probably won't hit. But like I said, removing my bias here, I think we're in for a close game, and if not, potentially the Cowboys winning this game, which is why I like Dowdle to get higher than 16.5 rushing attempts, and he is a must-play with that workload. So you're not going to hear me say that the Cowboys might beat us very often. Thankfully, Danny isn't on this video, but I think it is definitely possible we lose this game. So running back 18 for me is Jonathan Taylor versus the Tennessee Titans. They are 16th against the run. It would be so nice if Jonathan Taylor could perform at a level that would dictate his elite workload is worthwhile, because his workload, I'm not even exaggerating, is better than Saquon Barkley's right now. 82% of the snaps, that's better than Barkley. 74% of the carries, 60% route participation. I don't know how Jonathan Taylor has not been a bona fide RB1 this season. Saquon Barkley has, with a lesser workload, of course, and it has resulted for Jonathan Taylor, the workload that he has, in just 3 RB1 caliber performances all year and just 14.1 PPR points per game. Dude, just go out there and cook these bum-ass Titans, Jonathan Taylor. I'm challenging him. If you guys have JT on your team right now, me reverse jinxing him is precisely what you guys would probably be wanting, because I did the same thing for James Cook last week. If you guys have Taylor, I will do you the honor of ranking him too low so that I look like an idiot so that he performs for your fantasy team. So if he goes for like 36 fantasy points, remember to come back here and thank me for my service to your fantasy football team, because I am skeptical that Jonathan Taylor has what it takes to be a league winner down the stretch, and hopefully he does that for those of you guys that have him. So running back 19 for me is Kenneth Walker versus the Minnesota Vikings. They are 3rd against the run. Like I said, very challenging to rank this backfield right now because we do not know the health status of both of these running backs. But like I said, did not practice Wednesday, full participation on Thursday. But he does have the fact that he's missed the last 2 games with a calf issue hanging over his head here. An upgrade to a full participation on Thursday bodes well for his ability to play and to return. And based on the timelines that a lot of docs are saying about him, plus Charbonnet's injury where he might be out, it looks like Walker could end up being a great play this week. If Charbonnet is out, I do have Walker ranked at RB19, but you could convince me to move him higher than this, assuming Walker's going to play with no limitations. But again, if both of them are playing, I would probably downgrade Walker a little bit more than I have him here, probably like RB22 to 24, because he is still coming back from a multi-week injury. This game is just as much of a must-win for Seattle, though, as it is for Minnesota. Like I teased already, Seattle is gunning for the NFC West. They're the home team in this one, and a healthy Kenneth Walker would go a long way. The only reason I don't have him higher than this is that the Vikings are a top 3 run defense in the NFL, and that is a really tough matchup for Kenneth Walker. But again, if Charbonnet is out, that upgrades his workload, and it might see him have a little bit higher of a rating than this, maybe in the mid RB2 range. So running back 20 for me, Ramondre Stevenson versus the Buffalo Bills. We have a great matchup for Stevenson. I mean, they're 31st against fantasy running backs in adjusted fantasy points allowed, and he's done really well when he's had good matchups, and he's done really poorly when he's had bad matchups. He's actually been really predictable. The Patriots are an abject disaster on offense right now, and they're 14-point underdogs heading to Buffalo, so you might be looking at this one and being like, how good is Ramondre going to be if they're down 14 points? This could be an Antonio Gibson game if they're playing from behind, but even the Bills are exploitable on the ground. They are not a great defense, especially against running backs. 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. As long as this one stays relatively close for 3/4 of the game, I do think Ramondre Stevenson should have an opportunity to get some work, maybe find the end zone, get some targets, so on and so forth. So running back 21 for me in my rankings is Rachaad White versus the Dallas Cowboys, 18th against the run, as I teased for Bucky Irving already. Bucky and Rachaad both been great options this year. It's crazy to think that Rachaad White has outproduced Jonathan Taylor when Jonathan Taylor has the workload that he has. Again, more fuel to the fire for JT managers here. If Bucky Irving is in any way limited, Rachaad White sees an upgrade, and I would probably flip-flop where I have these two guys ranked. For now, I'm just treating both of them as RB2s because each guy gets like 13 to 20 touches. We know Bucky Irving's going to be more efficient with his, but Rachaad White does have 5 games of 6 or more targets this year, so he is still a very solid play in a great game environment. Running back 22 in my rankings this week is Brian Robinson Jr. versus the Philadelphia Eagles. I talked up Brian Robinson last week as the guy who needed a bye really badly, and that definitely applied to his workload because, as you can see here, 73% of the snaps, season high, and he hadn't creeped up on a 60% share of the team's rushing attempts since week 4. When he was last fully healthy at the beginning of the year. So Brian Robinson really saw his workload correct itself after the bye. It's a brutal matchup versus the Philadelphia Eagles, but I still do like the offense. The fact that this is a divisional game, Brian Robinson, the player, I still like him to produce as an RB2 this week, even though it is a tough matchup there. So running back 23 from Eagles matchup to a former Eagle here, we have DeAndre Swift versus the Detroit Lions. A little revenge game narrative here as well. 5th best run defense in the NFL. Although they have allowed top 5 weeks to Josh Jacobs and James Cook the last 2 games, Detroit is so decimated by injury that literally anyone can cook them on offense. Running game, passing game, quarterback, it doesn't matter. The Detroit Lions are a bad defense right now because of how many injuries they've had. And they just lost a starting corner in Carlton Davis. They just lost Aleem McNeil, one of their best defensive tackles. I think that will be the case when the Bears come to town. So that's why I have Swift ranked a little higher than I usually do, because Chicago took this team down to the wire at the end of the game a few weeks back. And last year, the game environment played out exactly the same. Last year, Chicago almost beat Detroit the first time they played and then actually beat Detroit the second time they played. And I could see them have this happen yet again. This one has over 48 points screaming all over it to me, and I want pieces of this game, so that's why I have DeAndre Swift at RB23. Running back 24, closing out this tier for me, is Tyrone Tracy versus the Atlanta Falcons. Tracy had a dud last week. I remember talking about that possibility on this very show, saying that, man, going up against Baltimore, they were like 16.5-point underdogs. This week, you got a rookie quarterback that you're facing with Michael Penix, so that helps out a little bit. It's not the Baltimore Ravens. Not to mention, you don't have Tim Boyle and freaking Tommy DeVito starting at quarterback. It appears Drew Lock, as bad as he is at least a lot better than those quarterbacks and can move the offense a little bit better and keep this game a little closer, hopefully. Atlanta is the type of defense you want to pass the ball against, but that's fine because Malik Neighbors is a good enough receiver to move the ball in the passing game, and Tyrone Tracy has 21 targets over his last 4 games, and if Drew Lock is starting, he has shown a propensity to check the ball down quite a bit. So Tracy, a little bit of a matchup upgrade for him this week relative to last week, but he is still a back-end RB2 nonetheless. Moving into my flex plays tier, and we have a lot of new names that we haven't talked about this year in this territory, starting with RB25 for me, which is Patrick Taylor of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the 26th ranked Miami Dolphins defense. No Isaac Guerrero. He is out, or likely out, with a hamstring injury. Taylor is now the 49ers' 5th string running back, getting the start in week 16, which is absolutely wild stuff. Miami is exploitable against fantasy running backs. They had Joe Mixon not have a great game against them last week, but he was hurt in that game, and I think we would have seen an explosion had he stayed healthy. I don't want to go crazy with Patrick Taylor and say that, oh yeah, like start him over Kenneth Walker or start him over Breece Hall or something. He's a fine flex play. Don't go crazy and start him over like a better option option who's been good for you all year. But if you need a guy and you picked up Patrick Taylor off of waivers, I do think he's a half-decent option this week. RB26 for me is Jerome Ford, who hasn't found himself into this territory very much. But with Nick Chubb out for the season, Jerome Ford against the 22nd ranked Cincinnati Bengals. Now, if Jameis Winston were starting, I would probably have him ranked higher than this. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to impact both the offense, their point production, their offensive production, and Jerome Ford's target share because he's a lot more mobile than Jameis Winston. It's a favorable matchup for Ford. It's an easy way to get yourself to go, oh, Jerome Ford, great play this week. But Dorian Thompson-Robinson, when he has started games the last 2 years for the Cleveland Browns, they have never scored more than 14 points in those games. And I'm worried that Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to just make this offense unwatchable. And I'm sure a lot of Jerry Jeudy managers are very worried about the same thing. And that is why I'm a little bit lower on Jerome Ford than, say, Danny, I think, has him ranked as a top 24 guy. A little bit worried about the Dorian Thompson-Robinson of it all. If Jameis was starting, he would be a no doubt slam dunk top 22, probably running back for me. But I downgraded him a little bit when DTR was named the starter. So RB27 for me is Najee Harris versus the Ravens. They are 10th against the run. Najee had a season low 34% of the snaps last week against the Eagles. And again, on this show, I said it wouldn't shock me if the Steelers can't move the ball on offense without George Pickens, and then they just completely shut the door on running the ball because the Eagles are so good against the run. And kind of the same thing could happen again because the Ravens, again, they don't have George Pickens in this game, and the Ravens are very good against the run. So hopefully we get like one of those slugfest AFC North games where it's a close game the whole way through. Najee and Jaylen Warren are kind of grinding it out, scoring touchdowns and whatnot. But like I said, it's a slippery slope this week because the Ravens are a top 10 run defense, and without George Pickens, the Steelers are going to struggle to move the football like we've seen the last couple of weeks. They're like 28th in EPA per play without him. So I don't love that matchup without George Pickens on the field. So that is why I have Najee downgraded a little bit. RB28 for me in my rankings is Isaiah Pacheco versus the 4th ranked Houston Texans defense. Pacheco just not the same since the week 2 injury. I mean, he clearly looks like he is not the same player. Maybe he had some ligament damage in that tibia injury or fibula injury. I can't remember what bone it was, but he regressed snap share wise last week, and that is not what you wanted to see. After 2 weeks of progressing, 33% of the snaps, 48% of the snaps, my expectation was 60% of the snaps in week 15. That is not what happened, and it is a top 5 run defense on the docket with the Houston Texans, with a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, who's probably hobbled in this game. I do not anticipate this game to be fireworks, like the NFL schedule makers probably thought it was going to be when they scheduled Kansas City Chiefs versus Houston Texans Saturday of week 16. This game might be 13-10, which would be extremely disappointing, but it wouldn't shock me if that is the case. And Kareem Hunt is clearly not going anywhere after what we saw last week in terms of the snap share. So I don't love that for Isaiah Pacheco, and I do not think he's a must-start option this week especially. And closing out this tier, we have Kendre Miller, who I have at RB29. Like I said, Kamara projected to be out for the season, but at the very least, he is out for this game. It's super unfortunate that the nutted scenario for Kendre Miller, where Alvin Kamara goes down and he's the RB1, is in this iteration of the Saints. We have no Derek Carr. We have no Chris Olave. We have no Taysom Hill. We have no Alvin Kamara. This offense is so bad. And with Rattler as his quarterback and MVS as his number 1 receiver to draw attention away, get ready for 14 carries for 36 yards, 6 catches for 22 yards for Kendre Miller in a game where they're 2 touchdown underdogs against Green Bay on the road. I don't think that you have to start Kendre Miller just because he's going to get volume. I think he's probably going to get bad volume, not good volume, behind a bad offensive line, a bad quarterback in a tough matchup. So Kendre Miller, I know you guys are probably super excited to start him because you got him off of waivers, but there's plenty of options at running back, 28 of them to be clear, and probably 40 options at wide receiver and maybe 15 options at tight end. I would rather start over him at this point in time. Running back 30 for me in my rankings is Travis Etienne versus the Las Vegas Raiders. They are 24th against running backs. I know Jacksonville technically is an underdog in this game, 1.5 points right now, but I think this one's going to be close because these are 2 really bad teams going up against each other. Aiden O'Connell is likely to start for the Raiders, which does upgrade their chances of winning quite a bit because Desmond Ridder is absolutely fucking awful and Aiden O'Connell's at least competent. Etienne played a 70% snap share last week, which is good because that means even in a positive game script, because they were beating the Jets for most of that game, Etienne was still getting the touches. I'm a total coward, so I rank these guys back to back. If you have to start one of them, I think they're fine. If the Jags are winning this game, maybe we see more Tank Bigsby, but we did see them winning last week, and they played more Travis Etienne. And I do think if this game is close, both of them are going to get a decent amount of run. It's a bottom 8 run defense now without their best player in Max Crosby, who's out for the season. So I feel pretty good about both Travis Etienne and then into the deep league flex plays. My RB31 is Tank Bigsby. I debated ranking him number 1 over Etienne, but up the middle, I think both of these guys are going to get some damage done. It wouldn't shock me if we get like 20 carries from Tank Bigsby because he gets hot and they just start feeding him. Like I said, both viable plays this week with how close the game should be and the fact that they are out without Max Crosby on the defense for the Raiders there. RB32 and 33 both locked in my rankings on Thursday Night Football. We had Javonte Williams versus the Chargers. Played last night, did lead the backfield in snaps. PPR scammed his way to a 12.3 PPR point day, but Audric Estime sniped the touchdown away, so it could have been a better day for Javonte Williams. RB33 in my rankings. Again, hindsight is 20/20. Don't go yelling at me in the comments being like, how could you have ranked him here? It's like I did this before he played the game. Gus Edwards had a monster game, 20.1 PPR points, scored 2 touchdowns, and actually looked the best he's ever looked in a Chargers uniform. I doubt many of you guys were ballsy enough to start him, but if you did, mazel tov, congrats to you. It is a great performance that he gave you there. So RB34 for me in my rankings is Amir Abdullah, same game environment as the Jags running backs. Part of me wanted to cope and be like, oh, it's going to be a close game, which means Madison's going to get more touches than Abdullah, which is probably true, but Abdullah on 11 or 12 touches is better than Madison on 18 touches is what I've learned so far. So I would play Abdullah of the 2 Raiders running backs with McCormick now out for the season. Jaylen Warren versus the Baltimore Ravens. Last week, the run was completely shut down. Hopefully that is not the case. Back in week 11 when the Ravens and Steelers played the first time, both of them, Warren and Najee Harris, scored over, I think, 11 or 10 PPR points. I don't really think that's going to happen again, like I said, because they had Pickens in that game and also because that game was in Pittsburgh, not in Baltimore. So don't feel great about Jaylen Warren this week. If you have better options, which, I mean, there's like probably 40 or 50 receivers I would start over him, you could definitely go in that direction. RB36, closing out this video, is Tyler Algier. Again, it's pretty straightforward. The Falcons are 9-point favorites against the Giants. If they run the ball like crazy in the second half, we could see a lot more Tyler Algier than we're used to seeing. He could carry the ball 10, 15 times. Whatever the case is, get some garbage time production there as well. So that is the end of my top 36 running back rankings. If you guys want to tail the pick'em entry that we built out throughout this video, we had the Aaron Jones rushing yards, we had the Rico Dowdle rushing attempts, and then we also had the Breece Hall rushing plus receiving yards. If you guys want to tail that pick'em entry, head on over to Underdog Fantasy. It'll be linked down below in the description and in the pinned comment. Sign up using the promo code FSE. You'll get our weekly rankings for the rest of the season, so week 16 and week 17 for those of you guys that have fantasy football matchups that are important, which I'm sure all of you guys do. You can get those for free when you sign up over on Underdog. You can tail this entry. You can get a special free pick when you sign up and deposit and make a play on the site using the promo code FSE. Make sure to use that promo code so that they know that we sent you over to Underdog Fantasy. So if that interests you, the link down below for that is in the pinned comment. Like the video if you enjoyed, if you got some value from it, comment down below any of your thoughts. I'm going to make a promise right now. It is week 16. It is really important. I'm going to try and answer every single comment on this video. I'm going to do my best to answer as many as I possibly can. So if you have a start-sit question, again, the answer to your start-sit question might be in the video. If it's my RB13 versus my 18, I would pick my RB13. But if you have other questions, flex decisions, whatever, I will do my best to answer as many as I possibly can. And hopefully I can get to every single one before Sunday morning kickoff. And we will be live tomorrow afternoon before Saturday kickoff, briefly, in case you guys have some fantasy questions over there. So stay tuned for that. Peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.